Hi there, I'm Adam Steele for the Hot Pole Studios, and today is a sad, sad day for me. Today is the day that I've made the decision that I'm no longer going to use my analog desk that you can see behind me at all. I've been using it less and less and less over the last few years, and today I wanted to talk about not only why I'm not using the desk anymore, but why engineers in their droves are just using less and less of the big fat mixing desks. I suppose the place that I would start with why I'm not using the mixing desk anymore is to go back a few years and talk briefly about why I did start using big mixing desks and why a lot of guys would use mixing desks. And the short answer is necessity. I mean, I'm not really talking today about the super high level desks like the Neve desks and the API desks and the high-end SSL desks. Those are in another league. Those things, if they're well maintained, and I will talk about that later actually, if they're well maintained, still have their place. But it's funny how much the mixing desk as a format is not just falling out of fashion, but falling out of use. So, going back, when we first started the studio with the company that I was working with, I've been a studio engineer for years. I learned on mixing desks. But when I first started, I was using a computer with a really cheap 2-channel interface and Cubase. And so all I had was 2 microphone preamps that weren't very good in this little unit, and like a headphone monitor output, and that was it. So I learned that way, that I learned the way that I didn't need a desk, because all I had was inputs, and then I had to do all the processing in a computer. Before that, because that we're talking 1999, 2000, 2001, so several years ago. Before that, if you wanted to get a decent sound, because everybody recorded to tape, you had to get a great sound onto the tape. Because afterwards, if you put a raw sound on tape, as soon as you try and manipulate that, you start bringing out the hiss, the noise, you start losing treble, you start to lose all these good things about the sound. You distort the vocals, you distort things that jump up, so they need compressing before they go in, they need EQ before they go in, they need good quality preamps on every channel, so that you're not sending any more hiss and noise to the tape, so that everything sounds good on the way in. So you essentially needed a big fat machine to get everything sounding right on the go, because there were no computers to do the processing. There was no second chance with a lot of this stuff. I mean, sure, in the 80s you would play things back off the tape and mix them, but even so, even at that point, even in the 90s, you didn't have unmixed tracks on the tape. You would process things going in so that when you hit play afterwards, it's pretty much ready. So you needed that quality going in, which is why people invested so much money in these big boards, because they had a preamp for every channel, but then they also had EQs for everything. They also had loads of different sends, so you could send physically the channels out to reverb units and delay units and all that kind of stuff, and also to like the drummer's headphones separately from the guitarist's headphones, separately from this, separately from that. So you needed quite a complicated piece of gear to send the same sounds to different places at different levels with different sounds. And when I got my first big desk, I got a Behringer desk. It was one of the Euro desks. I think it was a 24-track desk. It wasn't pretty, the sound wasn't amazing, but we decided with our own studio that we were going to expand from, I think, the 2-channel input that I had to a 16-input Edirol box, which again, we're talking 10 years ago or more. So this was kind of for a low budget that we had at the time. what we could do, and this Edirol box had 16 line inputs. I think it had 2 particularly poor microphone inputs which we didn't use. So to get 16 line inputs you need 16 microphone preamps. We didn't have the budget for 16 discrete preamps, but we found we could get a big mixing desk at a bit of a bargain because the prices of a lot of these mixing desks were falling in the mid 2000s. Because in the 90s and 2000s, cheaper mixing desks had become available where instead of having to pay £500,000 and get a remortgage for a 24 track desk, suddenly you could get one for £1,000 or £2,000, which sounds like a lot to some people, but for that many channels, it's really quite cheap. I mean, they didn't sound great, they sounded quite cheap, but the fact that you could record an entire drum kit, 2 microphones on each guitar amp, 4 singers, and still have room for some reverbs. Fantastic. And the fact that the desk that I got had a direct out for every channel meant I could record 16 at once, so I could record a full drum kit, which was great, but the quality wasn't really there. Now, fast forward a couple of years, and we moved from that Edirol box that had 16 line inputs to Focusrite's Liquid Sapphire 56, which is a decent kind of low mid-tier unit. It cost us £600, and we also got a Focusrite Octo Pre Mark II Dynamic, which I still use sometimes. And that between them, those were great. But what we were doing at first was running the direct outs from the desk into those. And we found that there was loads of noise and problems, and as soon as we plugged the microphone straight into the preamps on these interfaces, the noise was gone, the preamp quality shot up, because where it had been quite kind of, it sounded like it had been recorded through a sock before, and suddenly this was a quantum leap. So what we started doing is we plugged all the preamps into what we had, and all the 16 outputs on these then went to the desk so that we could send it to the guitarist, send it to the drummer, send different mixes to different people. And at that point it became essentially a giant headphone mixer. Now, fast forward a few years and we got this beast that's behind me, the Allen Heath GL3300. Now this is a much bigger, much more impressive desk than that Behringer. It doesn't have that stigma attached that the Behringer name has. The preamps are a lot better, very clean. They didn't really have any character to them, but they are very clean and the noise floor is relatively low. I still see quite a few live sound engineers with these if they've not gone digital, which is what I'm going to talk about next. This 40 channel monster with half decent EQ on every channel meant that I could then go back to using all the inputs on this desk. The other reason that I did that is I had all these vintage BBC line preamps that we'd managed to salvage from an old building that now doesn't exist that got knocked down in Manchester. But line preamps, what use are they? You can't really plug a microphone into it, so what we were doing was plugging the microphones into the Allen Heath, getting some clean gain, then pushing that through these line preamps to get some transformer saturation and some kind of vintage vibe before that then went off to the Focusrite gear for analog to digital conversion. After a while we found the same kind of problems. We were starting to notice noise, we were starting to notice some hiss, especially as these BBC units have got a little older. A lot of the time now I don't compress on the way in, I don't use EQ on the way in generally, I don't do any treatment on the way in, I do it all in the computer. I tend to use Reaper or maybe Pro Tools, and I live monitor everything through software. So I have headphone mixes going in software, I have compression, reverb, delay, all zero latency in software. Well, no additional latency, but that's the next point. The point that really seems to have broken the analog desk, metaphorically speaking, is that I got an RME RADAC card, a PCI card, which is the same kind of technology as Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt and PCI Express basically go straight to the processor of the computer and back. So there's almost no latency. I think I'm running 2.7 milliseconds of latency from someone making a sound to it coming back through all the virtual compressors, all that kind of stuff, and going back out to them in the live room. Which means that's low enough, they can't pick up that shorter latency. That's less, in terms of the speed of sound, than the distance between a piano player's hands. If you calculate the distance and the speed, you can't hear the difference really with that lower latency. So with really low latency, and I'm converting, and then I've got the Audient ASP800, which is 8 preamps, which are again really low noise, next level up from the Focusrite stuff, and I'm looking at higher level stuff again and again as I go. So as the studio does well and I invest in more gear, the way that I have now gone, I will be investing in higher quality conversion. I'll be basically getting lower noise, cleaner preamps, and then higher quality digital to analog conversion, so I can hear better what's coming back out. And my investment will not be in hardware. Maybe guitar amps as hardware, maybe drums as hardware, but probably not hardware compressors, EQs. I don't use them. I find that they negatively affect the sound, or at least I can't afford things like, Neve 1073 EQs per channel. I mean, maybe I could save up and get 1 or 2, but 24? That's way too much money for a studio that can produce a great result, I'd like to think, without any of that. And it's all come down to things like the Slate Digital Everything bundle. I don't know if you can see over here, there's the vocal processing on this right now is the new Slate Distressor plugin with a bit of vintage mojo. A virtual tape machine. I've got a Sony 2-track tape machine up there which hasn't been touched and is going dusty because of the potential problems it can have. I mean, why would I spend any more money or time on things that negatively affect the sounds, when the way that I work now, I just need the highest signal to noise, the cleanest preamps, unless I'm going for real transformer saturation, in which case the Audient ASP800's got 2 channels with inbuilt transformer drive and kind of a really nice sound that way. But I'm thinking I'm going to invest in the Slate virtual microphone system soon, which is going to be needing the cleanest conversion that I can give it, because technology is going that way. I mean, a lot of live sound, they're not using analog desks anymore because the digital desks are lighter, more portable, you can store all the settings, they've got inbuilt gates, compressors, all the hardware that used to be really expensive unless you got the really cheap Behringer racks. It's all inbuilt in this small portable form factor, which costs half as much because it doesn't need a ton of copper wiring inside. And because they cost less, if one breaks, it's probably under warranty. If it's out of warranty, you can buy a new one for the same price as getting that big solid desk that you used to have twice over. So analog really is now going the way of nostalgia and the upper echelons, I think. I mean, I've recorded in studios that have got like big Amek desks. I've recorded with an SSL 9000 K-series desk at Real World Studios in Box, Peter Gabriel's studio, and that is amazing, but I can't afford a console like that. And if I had the money to spend on it, I probably wouldn't. Not now. I mean, if I already happened to have something like that, if I inherited it, great, but I don't think I could afford to have an engineer to keep it working that well. I mean, that's the other thing. Analog desks need a lot of looking after. This desk behind me, I'm going to need to go through and service it soon and clean every single pot, every single bit of dust out of it to make sure it doesn't crackle when I turn the knobs. And that's not really acceptable as a piece of equipment that you use on a day-to-day basis. You need, really, unless you can afford to have a dedicated engineer, to turn it on and it work. So apart from guitar amps, which are built pretty tough, I don't use tubes anymore. I'm thinking of stopping using my SE Electronics Gemini because I've been getting noise on the microphone when it's been cold and the tubes haven't warmed up yet. I'm thinking of, not using the desk anymore. I've pretty much decided that. I don't really use those vintage BBC preamps at the moment unless there's a specific call for it. I mean, I don't even really use the vintage digital Yamaha desk that we got because I'm trying to go as software based as I can. Not because it's cheaper, but because it works as well for someone in my position, if not better. I can recall everything at the touch of a button with a project load. Analog, you can't do that. You need to write down every setting and keep it in a book. And that means that unless you're back in the studio, you're not going to be able to recall that mix. I read an interview with Andrew Sheps recently, who's one of the biggest mix engineers in the world. He used to absolutely rely on his Neve desk with all the 1073 preamps and wouldn't mix anywhere other than his studio, and he now mixes on his laptop. I mean, is the sound as good on headphones? No. But if it's a mix recall, for example, say you've done the mix in the studio in a well-treated environment, and you get a call from Beyonce or someone who goes, I love the mix, can we have the vocals a tiny bit louder in this section? All you need to do on your laptop is load up that software version that you've mixed, turn up that section a little bit, check that that's not too much, hit render, and that mix that you did in your environment with the monitors is still legitimate. And the only things that have changed are the recalls you've had to make. So I do this all the time, that I'll record with a band for a few days in the studio, I'll track everything, but because everything is mixed and done in the box, I can then take it home on my laptop. I can sit on the sofa with my headphones on and I can go through each channel and I can clean up edits. I can make sure that things crossfade where they should. I can make sure that every little detail that a mixing assistant would do is done from the comfort of my own couch. I mean, then I can come back to the studio and with nothing changing, I pull my iLock authorization out of my laptop, put it into the studio computer, load the files up on this computer behind me, and then go ahead and mix. Take it home for reference maybe, bring it back again, do the mastering, take that out for reference, maybe even take my laptop to the car and mix and master and reference on car stereo speakers live with the project that you would never have been able to do with an analog desk unless you had your car outside and a jack lead that's about 100 meters long going out of the building into the car. Or you have to burn CDs over and over and over and over. I don't have time for that. When I can just go home and just go play, and I can change things on the fly as I'm going, and I trust my own ears and my own headphones well enough that I can make educated decisions. Running in digital as opposed to having the analog desk running is liberating. And that's just about my 2 cents on this big opinion piece. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are. And let me know in the comments if you disagree with what I'm saying, or if you agree and how the industry's going that way. I do often wonder what the next stage is, if there is a next stage, and if the analog desks are going and we're going to entirely computer-based stuff, where do we go from here? Let's have a think about that. Thanks for listening. Check out our Patreon if you would be so kind. That's where we're kind of supported. I don't know if you know, but we're on Twitch as well. We do some live streams there, and we also play some games occasionally. I'm in the middle of playing through the original Fallout games, not Fallout 3 and 4, the old ones. And check out what we do. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, feel free to check out our other videos, as you can find here, or check out our Facebook and Twitter, or our Patreon page, which helps us to make more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.